about app-based businesses. As Chris mentioned, before we get into that though, we have a few Zoom room etiquette rules. So of course, number one is be camera ready. I see all of your beautiful faces. Make sure your camera is on and you are present. At the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, it should say stop video. If the line is through that icon, that means your video is off. If there is no line, that means your video is on. Next up is please keep your mics muted. Right next to the stop video is the mute icon. If the line is through it, that means your audio is muted, which it should be. All right. Next, if you can please rename yourself. If you go into participants at the bottom of the screen and find your name, next to your name, there's gonna be a rename option. So if you can please rename yourself to your full name, school initials, and your state. Again, under participants, find your name, rename yourself to your full name, school initials, and your state. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. Full name, school initials, and states. All right, number 4, if you guys have any questions for Abi, please drop them in the chat box. The bottom of the screen as well, next to participants, is a chat icon. Click on that, drop all your questions in there. All your questions will go to all of the hosts. That's Chris, Daniel, Julia, myself. And then we'll get to your questions either along the way or at the end. So any questions you have for Abi, just drop them there in the chat box. And then last but not least, just be present, enjoy the session. I'm gonna kick it over to Daniel to introduce Abi and get the show going.
Appreciate it. Thank you so very much, Dahaji. Awesome. Thank you very much all for popping in and hanging out with us for a little bit this afternoon. Today we're going to be discussing app-based businesses, and we have Mr. Abi Mandelbaum, sorry. Baum?
Yeah, Mandelbaum. Yep.
Mandelbaum, and he's actually the co-founder and CEO of YouVisit, which is a technology company that allows the users to experience being there when they can't physically be there. I imagine that such a company and such a concept is very relevant at a time like this. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, when you went to school, and if I'm not mistaken, you're also a NFTE alumni.
Well, first of all, thanks to everybody for joining. I know that there's plenty of Zoom meetings in the world happening right now, and I appreciate all of you taking the time to join this one. I very much look forward to this conversation. I've spoken to NFTE students many times in the past. I'm a huge fan of the organization. I love the type of work that students do as part of their business plans. So I'm happy to help in any way I can. With that, just to introduce myself. So name is Abi Mandelbaum. I am right now in my dungeon. No, just kidding. I am in my home in Miami. A little bit about my background. I'm originally from Colombia. Basically finished high school in Colombia, came to the US for college, went and did my undergraduate in Boston, worked for a number of years in both technology as well as finance. And from there, I decided to go do my master's in business administration, MBA, which I did in Philadelphia. And after that is when I decided to start the company that Daniel was referring to, YouVisit. Some of you may have come across YouVisit just during your time searching for colleges. And if you haven't, feel free to check it out under youvisit.com. But I'm happy to take any questions, Daniel, and add whatever would be helpful.
Awesome, awesome. So obviously we've got majority high school and middle school students on here. Talk to us a little bit about your experience when you were in school, right? Like, what was your favorite subject? Because you've done a lot of school. So what was your favorite subject in school? And also, what was your least favorite subject?
Yeah. Don't let my looks fool you. I usually look a lot older. It's that I shaved and cut my hair really short, literally just a couple of days ago. So yes, in total, I mean, did college, 4 years, then the MBA 2 years. And so I spent quite a bit of time. And I would say that in general, the subjects that I really tend to enjoy are subjects that involve logic, right? So math sort of being one of them. And the subjects that I honestly didn't do well at in high school were mostly subjects that required a lot of memory. I just had a really tough time memorizing things, but if they made sense, if there was some logic behind them, then I would just naturally gravitate to it. So, you know, history, things like that, I had a really tough time. They were the subjects that brought down my GPA, but the sciences and math and those sort of things that, you know, you're just sort of building logic on top of each other is something that I just really enjoyed, which is why eventually I decided to study computer science. I actually ended up doing a double major in college, computer science and economics, because you know, there were two sides to me. There was a side that really liked the technical aspect, but I didn't really want to be a programmer. I wanted to understand the technology and figure out how that could be applied to business. And, you know, very much that's what I ended up doing when I started my own company.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that you shared the fact that you actually did a double majoring in both business and technology, because we're seeing right now that business and technology have really merged together over the last 4 to 5 years, but we're really seeing that kind of accelerate right now. So when we speak about YouVisit, what is your current role with the organization?
So YouVisit, it's a very interesting story. So let's date back to 2010, exactly 10 years ago. Literally, it was June 2010. Myself and two of my college roommates decided to get together and start the company. And back then, you know, we had all had different jobs. We were all programmers. We knew about technology. And thinking back to our days actually as high school students, and trying to figure out which college to go to, we couldn't tell the difference between one college or another. It was just very hard. And everybody knows that, well, you know, if you visit a college, then you'll get a much better feel for it. However, it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time to visit those colleges in person. And with all of us being international students, literally I came from Colombia, and one of them came from Jordan, and the third one from Albania. So we had all had a similar experience looking for colleges in the US, where it was just very difficult to distinguish them. So what our idea became, now keep in mind, this is many years after leaving college, our idea became is, why is it so hard for a student to walk through a college campus virtually? And literally we came up with the concept of a virtual walking tour. And we coded the initial version ourselves. It looked terrible. It looked terrible. Still, when I look at it these days, I'm like, oh my God, that was so bad. I can't believe people bought it. But that's, you know, one of the learnings that we'll go deeper into later today. But at the end of the day, we really came up with a very innovative idea, which is, if it's so helpful to visit a college physically, but it's very challenging to do so, why not enable people to do that virtually? And colleges and students just loved it from the get-go. And as we grew the company over the last 10 years, we ended up creating tours for more than 800 colleges and universities across the country.
Wow.
Now, if you fast forward those 10 years, literally back in December, my company was acquired. So YouVisit was acquired by a much larger company. I am now with the larger company, helping them integrate YouVisit into their larger organization. To give you a sense, YouVisit was about 70 employees. The company that acquired us is over 1,000. So it's a much larger organization. They're integrating us, and I'm currently helping them with that. And so it was a very interesting 10 years. Learned a lot about entrepreneurship. And honestly, when we first started back in 2010, I would have never thought that we'd be able to accomplish what we did.
So I love the fact that that's where you ended, because what I wanted to speak about, right, it seems like it was you, some college friends, and an idea that came out of seeing the challenges that you had in your own experience, right? And along the way, you've obviously had good times and bad times. So can you share like what you would say was one of the biggest wins that you have had through this experience?
Sure, sure. I'd say, and I'll also talk a little bit about, a failure as well, just to keep it.
Just so you know, I was going to ask about failure next as well.
Okay, great. So, one of our big wins is, when you're starting a business, obviously you're craving clients, right? Clients, if it's more of an institution, a business you're selling to, or customers if you're selling more to individuals, right? In our case, we designed our business model very purposely, where we decided that we were going to sell the virtual tour to the university so that it would be free for the students. So as we started approaching universities, it was very challenging to get new clients. And we were offering the tour initially actually for free. We'd say, University X, let us come and do a virtual tour for free. And nobody wanted a free virtual tour. So then we actually started charging money for it, and people wanted it. So that was an interesting learning. But our biggest win came when Yale University signed up. I'm thinking to our early days. We had gotten some traction with schools that, they're just not schools with a big brand. But when Yale signed up, they became one of our marquee clients. And after Yale signed up, that's almost giving you like a stamp of approval, where you're saying, well, if you're speaking with any other college, they just say, hey, if Yale signed up, then this has got to be great. So that was a big win. And, I'll just emphasize the importance of like getting some critical clients that then just boost your reputation.
That's amazing.
In terms of, one of our challenging times, let's say, is back in 2016, we had been growing tremendously. And actually, at a certain point, we were actually starting to get closer to 100 employees. We were just like, oh, let's grow faster. And we took our eye off the ball. We basically said, hey, this has been so great for universities. Why don't we sell it to factories and hotels and cities and real estate and everybody else? And we did. We got clients like Hilton, like Hyatt, Cisco, Microsoft. They were doing factory tours using our technology, Hewlett Packard, the US Army, the US Air Force. So that felt very exciting. It was a very exciting time. However, we sort of lost track of our mission and why we really started the business in the first place. And I would say like the business at that time, we were in a very tough financial situation. We ended up having to ask for help and get a little bit of debt in order to get out of the situation that we get in. But thankfully, we realized early on, and we were able to correct course and come back to our calling, which was, no, let's stick with education. So just mentioning that because, those are some of the learnings as you start having success. Actually, I'll share an interesting story here. Mentors are very important. And one of my mentors, he's in his 60s. He's been involved with hundreds of businesses throughout his life. And in one of our first meetings, he tells me, Abi, you know what? You're like the typical Latin American entrepreneur. and I took offense. I was like, wait a minute. Like, what do you mean? He's like, what I see, the Latin, the Hispanic entrepreneur in general, obviously, when they have success in one thing, they just go on and want to do something else. And they're like, and that's a big problem because the US market is so big that if you become great at something, just stick with that something and keep on getting better and dominate the whole market. So at first I took offense in that comment, but eventually I realized what he meant is we had gotten distracted. And it was only when we came back to our roots that things started taking off again.
That is a critical a lesson to be learned, right? Like once you've identified a mission, don't get too far off of that mission because it causes you to lose your way. And there can be some challenges that come with that. So thank you very much for sharing that. We talked a little bit about, how you came up, like identified a problem, right? You found something that you each shared an experience, right? Each of you was from someplace different, but you all shared a common experience. And you set out to solve that. What were some of the challenges that came along with the technology aspect of it, right? Because you said when you look back now, using today's 2020's technology, and you look back at your first iteration, it looks horrible. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, and here's what I meant with that comment. A mistake that I see a lot of entrepreneurs making is that they wait until the product is amazing before taking it to market. And the reality is that you're going to end up with a much better product through iteration, right? So even though I look back at 2010 and I say our product looks horrible, it looks horrible looking back today. But at that time, people were like, wow, that's really cool. I've never seen something like that. And so for us, actually, the biggest challenge was not the technology, it was the commercialization of that technology. And we were all very technically minded, so we were able to build it, but we were having trouble selling it. And so we just had to learn. I became our first salesperson. I just learned, how you sell. I would say I do have some natural ability for it, but most of it was just trial and error and getting in front of a lot of people and getting used to hearing no a lot of times. But I was like, well, if out of 10 universities I pitch, 8 say no and 2 say yes, that's huge. That's a big win. So I think as an entrepreneur, it's just growing that thick skin to put yourself out there and your product and be comfortable with the fact that, yes, most people are not going to buy, but you don't need most people to buy. You just need some to buy. And then you're off to the races.
I love that. When looking, so you spoke to, I remember you said you tried to give it away for free, people wouldn't take it, and then you started to charge for it, and then people wanted it. So speak to us about developing your business model. How did you figure out what worked? How many times did you get it wrong before you actually got it right?
Countless times we got it wrong before we got it right. But I'll tell you 2 things that thinking back were critical in just determining our success. The first one is we learned that when you give something either for free or for a very cheap price, then that sends a message, right? And the person on the other end then assumes like, well, if it's so cheap or free, then it must not be great. Right? So don't always think that because you price something lower, you're going to sell more of it. Yes, in general, within a range, right? If you're charging somewhere between, let's say, $10,000 and $20,000 for something, yes, there's probably an optimal range in there. However, if you're typically 10 to 20, it doesn't mean that if you start selling it for 5, you're going to sell a lot more. Because then people say, well, all right, 5,000, it's not. So anyway, just something to keep in mind, that when you price something very low, and we learned it the hard way, then people don't see a lot of value in it. And then secondly, the thing we learned, because when we came into the market, there were a lot of virtual tour companies. We weren't the first. We weren't the first there. I mean, there was a company that had been in the market for like 8 years before we came along. I remember running into them at a conference, and I go up to their booth. I hadn't started a YouVisit, but I had it in mind. I wanted to learn a lot about the market. So I go up to their booth at the conference and I say, how many tours do you do a year? And they said, 24. And I went back to my partner and said, guys, we are doomed. They do 2 tours a month. How are we ever going to compete with that? I'm not kidding. Literally 3 years later, we were doing 100 plus a year. right? So we got up to 10 a month. And so it's amazing how, you know, when you're getting started with something, you may feel like, how am I ever going to get that big? But the lesson there is like every humongous business that you see out there started off very small. Every single one, nobody started big. So, you know, just start and make sure you have a good business model. Now, the key differentiator for us is we said, well, and it's hard to go and sell every year. So why don't we do it as a subscription instead? So we would go to, let's say, Harvard University became one of our clients, and we'd say, Harvard, if you pay us this amount every year, we will make sure that your virtual tour is always using the latest technologies. And we'll come back to your campus every so often to update it. So what that did for our business model is all of a sudden, we weren't starting every year from zero, right? When you think about revenue, right? Every year you would start with last year's revenue already. And it was you either lost that client or they continued paying you, or you would sell them something else. So I've become a huge fan of subscription models. And if you notice, they're everywhere today.
Absolutely.
And you may have not noticed it, but I guarantee you that if you look at the things you consume, most of them are probably charging you as a consumer a monthly fee, right? You probably subscribe to some music service. They don't charge you like, hey, pay me $200 and you'll have it for the next year. Oh, hey, just pay me $9.99 a month. And you just pay it and that's it. You just continue. And now you've probably been paying that for who knows how long. And if you calculate it and somebody told you, hey, you know that over the last 4 years, you've paid $500 for music, you'd be like, what? That's crazy. But yet these companies, they just keep, you know, getting all that revenue. And so that's just one example, but it applies to everything. I mean, look at your cell phone, look at everything. It's subscription based. And all of the companies, you know, you even look at something like Microsoft Office. Microsoft Office used to charge hundreds of dollars for you to buy it at a single point in time. Now, no, you pay us this amount every year, and then you always have it. So as you guys are thinking about your businesses, just ask yourself the question is, how can I turn this into a subscription? Because it's just much easier to run a business that's subscription, and because it's more predictable and it's easier to retain your customers.
And the really cool part, and I don't know if you were like eavesdropping on Tuesday, but Tuesday's session was about subscription-based businesses. So that's why Julia's laughing, because what you said pretty much just reinforced what we discussed on Tuesday about developing a business where your business model bakes in your revenue each year. And it's really about retention rather than starting from zero, like you just said. So that was.
And look, you know, there's a way, I believe most businesses, even if they're not naturally, it doesn't feel like naturally they're a subscription business, there is a way generally to convert them into subscription. And it's worth doing it. I mean, I'll give you an example. I have a close friend. He runs an underwear company. They sell men's underwear online. And amazing. They now sell millions of pairs of underwear a month. But what did it for them is they said, hey, instead of charging somebody $20 and they get, you know, X pairs of underwear, they started charging, it was something like $8.99 a month. And every month we send you a new pair of underwear with different designs. And so, you know, you wouldn't think like buying underwear would be a subscription thing, but they turned it into that. They made it fun, different designs, design of the month, and this sort of things. And all of a sudden, they have a predictable growing business. And so just something to keep in mind that, you know, people, when they think about subscription, they think it's for certain businesses. I think most businesses can adapt to include some type of subscription.
And that's a huge lesson to kind of, it's almost like an uncovered gem, because we didn't plan to talk about that, but I'm glad you said that, because it really does give a different perspective of how to approach your business model and just tweak it to make it more efficient and extend the life of a business. And when we're talking about like a business, a tech-based business, talk to us about kind of identifying and talking or defining your costs, right? What was the process of figuring out, okay, we're creating something from our mind, what does that cost?
Yeah, so at the beginning, honestly, we had no idea because we were offering, it's like a virtual product. We have to go on campus. So at the beginning, cost honestly was not a big focus for us. It depends on, if you're selling we're selling more of a service / product. You're selling bow ties. You better know your cost. Because I've heard this joke every now and then. It's like, hey, our costs are higher than our revenue. And then the other person said, well, don't worry, we'll make it up in volume. And it's like, well, no, if your costs are higher than what you sell it for, then you can't make it up in volume. So anyways, but for us, when cost really, so let me actually give an example. So we're going back to that time in 2016 when we started selling a lot to other types of companies, right? Hotels, big brands, and they would actually pay us a lot more money than universities, a lot more money. So we took our eye off the ball from the cost side, right? We said, wow, they're paying us so much more than universities. It's okay if we spend more delivering the service. But we took the eye of the ball to a point that once we finally sat down, as we were trying to make the decision, all right, do we continue serving these markets or we get out? That when we calculated it, actually our margin was so much lower with these clients than it was with universities, even though they were paying us so much more. Because we were doing just a lot of extra work for them. And we hadn't realized. So look, the way you go about calculating your costs is you just have to understand your business, right? And just make sure you understand every step of the process that it takes to deliver your product or service. There's no other way to do it, right? It's like just understand your business and every step in that journey. The most important thing, though, I feel is that, a lot of times there may be opportunities that may seem like, wow, but, this is such a big order or this is such a big whatever, that it's very easy to let go of the numbers you've run your business on just to, for the excitement of serving that. And a lot of times it can be dangerous, right? So just be clear that, if you're going to significantly sacrifice your margins or something like that, make sure that there is a benefit on the other side, because if not, it just ends up becoming a big distraction for your business. Now, the last thing I'll say is that most businesses, including us, I think, have a much easier time calculating costs than they do opportunity costs. And opportunity cost is very important. And a lot of times people don't even think about it. So I'll give you an example of opportunity costs, right? If we're going out there and selling and creating these virtual tours for hotels, it obviously takes resources, takes money, takes people. So then the question is, well, what's the opportunity cost of doing that versus not serving hotels and just putting more effort on universities? But, it's not second nature, right? That it's very easy as an entrepreneur to see the opportunity, right? You look at it and you're like, there's an opportunity in hotels. But then you have to calculate, well, what is the opportunity cost to the university side of now me being distracted serving hotels? So think about how you can apply that to your own business.
That's huge, because I don't think we talk enough, both in class, but just in general, about opportunity costs and, once again, how it can get you off your mission and distract you from your original goal and your original identity. When talking about YouVisit, right, what was kind of the business process from like going to a college to getting them signed on to like, talk a little bit about that process, what that looked like.
Sure. So, and by the way, I encourage, some of you afterwards to go and check out youvisit.com. You should be able to very easily get to some free virtual tours in there. So a lot of the things we're talking about, I think will just jive a lot better. The process was relatively straightforward. So let me summarize it here. So let's take a universal example. Let's say Harvard. So Harvard says, YouVisit, I want you to create a virtual tour for me. So what do? We would first start off, and our business had two sides. It had a technology side, right? The people creating technology, and then the production side, the people that have to go on campus to actually capture the media. So that's when the production people would come in and say, all right, Harvard, we're going to create a virtual tour for you. Let's think about like what makes Harvard unique. And there'd be a lot of strategic talks about, all right, how are we going to go about building this virtual tour? So that's what's called pre-production, right? Is you're preparing for the production. Then the production is actually generally two people would go to campus. They'd be like having so much equipment on them, and mainly 360 cameras, video, photo, everything. So two people with a ton of equipment, and I mean, literally so much equipment that many times they get, stopped at airports. They'd be like, what do you have here? So anyways, so then that's the production part. And the production was literally, it would always start by saying, all right, Harvard, give me your campus tour. Let's walk through your campus. Give me your tour as you would any student. And then they take that as the baseline and then build on top of that. So they capture all the photography, all the videos, and then comes post-production. And in post-production is where you touch up the images, right? You arrange them. And that's where our technology will come back in. We built a piece of software that would enable you to load up all these images and videos, and it would put together the virtual walking tour for you. And then we'd say, all right, Harvard, your tour is ready. And we'd work with them to give them a piece of code so they could put it up on their site.
Wow.
So if you go to harvard.edu and you look at virtual tour, you're going to see a virtual tour by YouVisit.
So it seems like a very simple thing to do, but there was a huge undertaking to make all of that happen. It wasn't just like, oh, we just go out, take a couple of pictures and call it a day. There was an actual process to everything that you did.
Oh, yeah. And look, over time, you perfect it, right? Like our first implementation, we got to the point where literally a day after our photographers and videographers would be on campus, the virtual tour could be 80+% ready, because we built a technology that could do that and mixed it with the process. But yes, look, perfecting the process is a continuous thing, right? And as a business owner, you always have to be thinking about, well, what process has the most waste, or, it's suboptimal, and then go and target that. But you can only do so many processes at a time, right? So for us, that was a very important one, is to figure out how to optimize the process. Because when you think about it, if you're doing 120 tours a year, that's 10 a month. And for you to be able to do 10 tours a month, you better have a streamlined process. So, and that applies to any business, right? If you're selling bow ties, the process you need to sell 10 bow ties is very different than 1,000, very different than 1,000,000, right? So, you have to make sure that your process is right for the volume that you want to be selling.
Makes sense. Now, and I think you spoke to this briefly, but really want to share this thing where, what do you think would be the top 2 or 3 benefits of having a technology business?
I mean, look, honestly, I'd say like if I can pick any business, I think technology business is the best.
So talk to us. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, so number one, margins in technology tend to be a lot higher. And number two, they tend to be highly scalable. Think about Zoom. How many of you hadn't used Zoom before Corona? And now the whole world is using Zoom. And was it hard for Zoom to achieve that? Probably not. They probably had to talk to Amazon, who does their hosting, and increase what they spend. But imagine imagine a physical product, right? Where you say like, now everybody in the world wants your bow ties. It'd be like, oh my God, how do I do this? So you generally in technology, you have the mixture of great margins that are scalable. Also, I would add that with technology, you have fewer fixed costs. So times like this where you have a lot of businesses struggling, right? When you think about Corona, you think retail, right? You don't tend to need retail space, big offices. You can do a lot of work remotely. So your fixed costs are lower, and that just gives you more flexibility as an entrepreneur. So that, you in tough times, it's easier to maneuver. And lastly, I would say technology businesses it's very easy for technology business to be subscription businesses, right? When you think about a dry cleaning, yeah, could you make a dry cleaning into a subscription? Hey, you pay me X a month and I dry clean whatever you send me. You could, maybe. But in technology, it's just very, very easy. So I'm a big fan of technology. There is one big downside to a technology business.
I was going to ask about that. Talk to me.
The big downside to a technology business is that you can become obsolete overnight. You can become obsolete overnight if you don't keep up with the technology. And you see it happening. I mean, there's companies that, they have the best sort of technology out there. I mean, Zoom is a good example. I'm going to mention some companies, and you guys are probably going to say like, oh, I've never heard of them. And they're still actually massive. But WebEx, GoToMeeting, RingCentral. You're like, have any of you during Corona considered using those for online meetings? Probably not. Those are companies that have been around for way longer than Zoom. They're still pretty big, but Zoom just came out with better technology. And now the video world is gravitating to them. So it's not like those companies are going to go bankrupt. But over time, Zoom is going to continue taking market share for them. So again, that's one of the downsides. Like for Zoom, being in the technology business is great. For these other ones that got, let's say, outpaced, it's difficult. So I would say that's the biggest downside of technology. And that was a worry in the back of our heads all the time, right? Like, what if somebody comes up with something better, technology-wise? But, worrying about it doesn't do much good. So we just took the approach of like, we just have to innovate and spend a lot in R&D, research and development, in order to make our technology better. And hey, if even doing all those things, somebody can do it better than us, then so be it. Thankfully, nobody did.
So when talking about a technology-based business, for the students that are thinking of starting technology-based businesses, what would you say would be 3 tips if anything we haven't discussed that you want to share with them?
I mean, honestly, I don't think the tips would be that different from any other business. I would say number 1, really understand your market. But really, I think I didn't really understand the university market when I first started selling to them. And it took a few years because I was just busy running the business. But I'm like, wow, if I would have known all that information as I was starting it, it would have been so much easier. So really take the time. I know that it's maybe not the most exciting thing to do, just to sit down on your computer and do some research where what else is out there, what other companies and products are similar to mine, even if they're not exactly the same, and what channels can I use to sell it. But really take the time to learn the business, rather than just be like, oh, I'll just figure it out. You know, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and headaches by spending that time up front. Say for every hour you spend really understanding your industry or your product class, early on, you're probably saving hundreds of hours down the line. So I would say that's number one. Number two is, I would say, get out there. Like just, you know, I always talk about, you know, even at YouVisit, like, hey, we're in this cave, making all these assumptions of what the world wants and all this. It's like, at some point you got to get out of the cave. And generally speaking, starting a business, the sooner you get out of the cave, the better. A lot of times people have worries that, oh, but somebody's going to then copy my idea and somebody's going to do this and that. It is so hard to build a business. It is hard. If somebody's not just going to take that idea and be like, oh, now I have a business, and you don't, it just doesn't happen that way. So just get out of your cave, talk to people. I'm not saying like broadcast, you know, like when I say get out of your cave, I mean, talk to people that can help you, right? It may be folks at Nifty, it may be folks at your school, it may be businessmen in your community, it may be family members. Just tell them what you're thinking. I mean, they have so many more decades of experience. I mean, like I'm trying to think about myself now versus myself 10 years ago. I know so much. So things that other entrepreneurs come to me and they say like, oh man, I'm really struggling with this. You're like, well, you should just do this. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't think about it. But I wouldn't have thought about it 10 years ago either. So just get out there, ask for help, talk to people. So do some research on your own, really understand things, then really get out there. And lastly, I would say is iteration beats perfection. And what I mean by that is don't worry about coming out with the perfect product. Worry about coming out with a good product and knowing that you're going to improve it over time. Iteration ends up getting to a much better result than trying to be in your cave again and figuring out the product. And I would tag on to that also is a lot of entrepreneurs, they become so passionate about the product or service they're selling that they put all their work into the product or the service and they forget that they have to go out and sell. So it doesn't matter. I can give you tons of examples of products that are not great, but they have great sales because they're just very good at sales and marketing. And vice versa. You have a lot of great products out there that make bad companies because they have a great product, but they have bad sales and marketing. So as an entrepreneur, your tendency is going to be focusing on your product, on your service. Either you or somebody that you're working with needs to also be focused on the marketing and sale of that product or service.
That's pretty cool. And it's great that you ended on that because that thought, because we want to shift a little bit to talking about the students presenting, right? In your role, you did a lot of sales, and at the end of the day, sales is a lot like their presentation for competition is pretty much sales, right? It's a sales pitch. Do you have any kind of tips or things that you want to share about sales? Or the presentation, sorry. About
yeah, I was gonna say, I do have, I've witnessed a lot of these presentations. And by the way, I should start by saying that you guys are years ahead of where I was when I was your age. I mean, do you think the idea of a business plan ever crossed my mind while I was in high school? No way. No way. You think I had ever, used Google Docs or Microsoft Office? No, none of that. So it's awesome where you guys already are and you want to make the most of it. And you guys are in a really good place. Now, in terms of your presentations, the main advice I can give you is practice. you think about, how long are these presentations usually, Daniel?
5 or 7 minutes, depends on which level they're
I
at.
mean, they're 5-7 minutes. You shouldn't be getting up there and not knowing exactly how it's going to come out. No, by the time you get up there, those 5 minutes need to be scripted and practiced many times with people giving you feedback so they can tell you what's great and what's not. It's the equivalent of a sales pitch, for example. Like if I go out and sell to 10 people, by the time I get to the 10th person, I'm probably going to make a much better pitch. So by the time you go out there and you present your business, it should feel like the 20th time you've done it in front of an audience. So not just do it in front of the mirror, right? But it shouldn't be a surprise. Like you knew this was coming. You knew you were going to have 5 minutes. Like, just practice. Now, in terms of, beneath that, I would say remember what you're going to be judged on, right? So make sure, I don't know exactly what those things are, but whatever they are, the criteria, think about your audience, think about the criteria they're going to be judging you on, and make sure that you focus your presentation on those things. I see too many entrepreneurs that they just get so passionate about something that is so irrelevant to the people they're presenting to. So you're coming out with all this passion and dedicating, let's say 2 minutes out of the 5 to this thing that the judges may be like, oh, whatever, right? You want to focus on, why are you the right person for this business? Show us that you really understand this industry. And that goes back to what we spoke about earlier. Do you really understand this, or you're just more in your cave, making all these assumptions? And thirdly, do you have a path to scale, right? So, and that's generally sales and marketing. I'll tell you, a lot of the presentations I've witnessed from Nifty students, I love what they're talking about, the product, the market fit. They've really figured out the unit economics. And then they get to like, I'm going to sell 10. And you're like, what? That's so deflating, right? Like think big, right? Like how can you, maybe you say I'm going to sell 10 next month. But then like a year from now, I'm going to be selling 1,000. And in 2 years, I'm going to be selling 1 million. But don't just say it, like back it up. Like here's how I'm going to do it. And everybody knows that the way you think you're going to do it is going to change. But at least it shows that there is a path to scale and that you've thought about it, and that you're wise enough to recognize that to build a great business, you need scale.
I like that. I want to say first and foremost, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us, Abi. We cannot do what we do in this particular series without your assistance and really the generous time that a lot of our volunteers spend sharing their insights with their students. I want to leave a little bit of time to let the students ask some questions. Alejandro, do you have your hand up? Nope. Do we have any students with any questions?
Now Alejandro has his hand up.
All right. Unmute, you've got the floor.
We also have Leandro Oliva, who had his hand raised, right? Yeah.
Leandro, you're up.
Yeah, my question was, how can we turn a car business into a subscription-based business?
How can you turn what?
A car business.
Tell me a little bit more about the car business.
Well, let's say, for example, we buy a car that's like all messed up. We fix it. We put it like new. Like we pretty much restore it, and then we sell it. How can we make that a subscription business?
Well, actually, the car industry already turned it into a subscription business by creating the lease, right? I'm sure you've heard that now a lot of people don't buy their cars; they just lease them. So, that's a way that the car industry already did that, and where instead of saying, hey, you're going to pay me $5,000, you're just, sorry, let's say $20,000 for a car, you're just gonna pay me $400 a month. And come X time, you're gonna, if you return it to me in good condition, you can take out another one and you keep paying me. So just think about, you know, I think for a smaller car business, it may be challenging because you need scale. But that's a way to do it, where instead of selling it as a, hey, you pay me this much and I just give it to you, I actually still own the car, you're paying me, it's almost like a rental, you're renting it for me. So an idea that's coming through my mind as we're talking is, it sounds like these cars that you guys, you know, fix up, I'm not sure what kind of cars they are, but imagine, again, I'm just throwing ideas out there. If somebody paid X $100 a month and they don't actually have to keep the same car every month. Maybe you convert it more into a rental business. Hey, you're going to pay me X $100 a month. And then every month you can come in, and as long as you give me the car in, you know, in good condition, then you can take out another one. And yeah, again, I'm not sure what kind of customers you have and what kind of cars, but just start thinking that way, right? Just say, all right, I'm not giving you the car, I still own it. You pay me more of a rental while you have it. And then what other benefits can I give you? Now, the critical part is, in turning something into a subscription business, you got to make sure you know your numbers. So, you know, you got to get into Excel and project them out. You don't want, you know, to be charging a monthly price where you actually end up making less money over time, right? The goal would be, I'll give you some math here just to think about, and for the rest of the group as well. Imagine you could sell it for $5,000, right? You sell the car for $5,000. And then that's it. You made that, they paid you the 5,000. Now imagine if instead they paid you $300 a month, right? So if they pay you $300 a month, in the first year of that car, you'd only have 3,600, right? So you're worse off in the first year. You could have had 5,000, you only have 36. But by the time you get to the year and a half, now you have your 5,000 and they're still going to continue paying you. So generally the subscription business is interesting in that, you know, you make less cash up front, but you make more over time. So you just want to make sure that you set up your numbers in a way that you actually do end up making more over time. In our business at YouVisit, when we made the switch, it would actually take us, you know, before we used to charge everything up front. Then we made it a subscription. It took us a lot longer to break even on our cost, but once we broke even, it would just keep on adding and adding over time for years. So just start thinking about it from that standpoint.
Thanks.
Great question.
You're welcome. Thank you. Ms. Brown, I see you've got your hand up. How can we help?
Good afternoon to everyone. My question is regarding today's climate, you know, in terms of what we're all dealing with right now, which is our new normal, as you know, that's the term that you hear all the time. I really believe that our students are going to be innovative and innovators as we move through this trying time. This is their life experiences. So I'd like to know, what do you think is going to be, how is this going to affect, I should say, technology businesses and other businesses in general, and trying to move forward and be profitable in this very, very, very excruciating time for business and for people in general?
I mean, look, as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for opportunity, right? And I think actually times like these, even though they're very challenging for the world at large, they also create a lot of opportunity. And when there is So historically, a lot of great businesses get created during times of crisis. And so I think we're right now one of those inflection points. And I don't think there are some trends in the world pre-coronavirus that were going to take place no matter what. Like moving to the virtual world was going to happen, right? It's not like, oh, I can't believe now we're doing Zoom. No, I mean, I've been doing online meetings for 10 years. So it just, a crisis time like this is accelerating those trends, right? So I don't think it's more that it's changing it, it's just changing them faster than they would have otherwise changed. I think it's going to significantly change the way education works, because people are realizing like, oh, you can actually do a lot of online education. And for some things, it may actually end up working better than physical presence. And, oh, do you really have to take that many business trips to go meet with go meet with people in person? Well, maybe not. Maybe I'll limit my travel. And so again, I don't think it's really gonna change a lot of the trends. I think it's just accelerating them. And as entrepreneurs, we should all be thinking about, well, what opportunity gets created to disrupt the way things have been done, or disrupt the company that has been doing it until now. Can we do it better now, given the change of the trends?
Awesome. And last question, Oscar Rivera, you are up.
Yes, hi.
Hey.
So this is a very like broad, it just came into my mind, and I just wanted to get your opinion on a subscription type of base for college books. For college books, because it could be costly when it comes to your tuition, but if a company comes out with a subscription for college books, I mean, it just came into my mind, so I have to do some research. But what would you think?
I love that you said I have to do some research, number one, because you're right. The first thing you should ask is Google. That's the first person you should ask. Very easy. And it's always available. So check out a company called Chegg. C as in Charlie, H-E-G-G. And I believe they're already doing that. They've been doing it for a number of years. As a business, absolutely, it makes sense. My question would be more, what is the next version of that? What is the next version of, like, really, textbooks still? That's where my mind would be at. It's not, I feel like the move from like buying a textbook to renting a textbook, great, but more about like, what's the next evolution of the textbook? And you guys are using textbooks all the time, so probably it's one of you that will figure it out. And so that's where I'd be thinking.
Okay, thank you very much.
And it's I love the fact that you gave them a resource to check out, because I'm also reminded of the fact that Amazon started initially to sell back textbooks from college students, right? So like all you're trying to do is figure out, okay, what's next to solve a problem that's a real problem today. Thank you so very much, Abi. I'm going to give you the floor if you just want to share any last thoughts that you really kind of want to leave and impart with these young people. Yeah,
so first of all, I would say thank you again for showing up. It'd be very boring for me and Daniel to be having this conversation without all of you listening. And I would say, like, look, you are very privileged in being able to have this opportunity so early in your lives. Cherish it. And look, we all know that, you guys will probably go on to start multiple businesses throughout your lives, right? And the business you're working on now, think about it as a learning opportunity, right? It's a great learning opportunity. You hear about all these billionaires, and all of them like started businesses in high school, and they weren't the businesses that made them billionaires, but those were the businesses that probably inspire them and train them to then later on do their thing. So really embrace the moment, learn as much as you can, and talk to people like we are here today. You can learn so much by getting out of your cave and talking to people. And I'm not saying like texting, like actually talk to them. So I highly encourage all of you to do that, and good luck on your business plan presentations.
Awesome. Abi, if you could please share how they can get in contact with you, either if you want by email or social media in the chat. Students, thank you so very much. I believe Chris has put in the link to do the survey. That is how we're tracking attendance. We do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so very much for joining us today. Julia, do you have anything that you wanted to make sure we cover before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, that was fantastic. Thank you, Abi. The only thing that I'll just plug for everybody, because I know we've had a ton of students that have been on these like at least one a week. I see a lot of familiar names popping up, and I see a lot of students that have really, really awesome questions about their specific businesses. Just a reminder, we started Fast Pitch Fridays last week. They are a group of like 15 to 20 volunteers that want to help you with those exact questions. So if you have questions specifically around your business, or you just want to like test out your pitch with somebody, we've now had several of our speakers talk about the importance of trying your pitch and just seeing how it goes, and letting yourself fumble over words and then getting feedback and trying it again. These are meant to be super safe spaces for you to do that. You're not getting scored. You're not getting graded. It's just a chance to try out your pitch and ask somebody some questions. So they're the same time as all of these. They're at noon Eastern time. And our second one is tomorrow. So I know Chris has been sharing them out with everybody, but just wanted to share that in case anybody was like, what the heck is a Fast Pitch Friday? That's what they are. You just come, you ask your questions, you give your quick pitch, and you get some feedback. That's it.
Awesome. Well, that's it, y'all. Y'all can go and have lunch. I'm probably going to do the same. Abi, always a pleasure. Thank you so very much once again. To each and every one of you, y'all have an amazing day. We hope to see as many of you as possible tomorrow. Other than that, stay safe, stay healthy. Best to you and your families.
Daniel, let me tell my students one thing. Daniel.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
Coral Gables students, I just put the survey on Edmodo. So if you're having problems finding that, it is on Edmodo now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care, y'all.